Hello, and welcome to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you here with us. And our guest today is a returning guest who tallies some of the most important information we needed then when he started compiling in 2010, and we need it more today. Well, wait a second. You say 14 years later, we should have fixed everything. We haven't. And we haven't fixed the most important discussion we should be having that we're going to talk about with Jeff in a moment. Let me just give you a little rundown on my friend here. In 2010, Jeff Dill, he was a former captain with the Palatine Rural Fire Prevention District. And then in 2011, Jeff founded the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, FBHA. This organization, like ours, Five Alarm Task Force Corp., is an IRS-Certified 501c3 nonprofit. Jeff travels the United States and Canada, holding workshops to teach firefighters and EMS personnel about behavioral health awareness and suicide prevention. What you say? Suicide prevention? Oh, yeah. We're going to be talking about that. FBHA was the first known organization that collected and validated data on firefighter and EMS personnel suicides across the U.S. In addition, FBHA holds classes for counselors, chaplains, family members in preparing for retirement. And we will give you a contact method for Jeff if you have any questions or you need their help. Jeff Dill holds a master's degree in counseling from Argosy University in Illinois. He's a licensed professional counselor and retired, as we mentioned, a retired captain at the Palatine Rural Fire Protection District in Inverness, Illinois. And it is, oh, by the way, he's also the behavioral health administrator for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. And if you've ever been out to Las Vegas, you've had an opportunity to see our brothers and sisters in Vegas and Clark County, but he's taking care of Las Vegas, how aggressive they are. They've learned from two major tragedies in the city, both at hotels. Some of you might be too young to even remember the first one, but it is important for us to know that a department as active, as dedicated as Las Vegas Fire and Rescue have a guy like Jeff as the behavioral health administrator. Welcome to the show, Jeff. I'm so glad to have you back again.
Steve, it's great to be back again. I haven't seen you in a few years, so it's good to be here in front of you. And keep up your dedicated work.
Well, we're going to try, officially we've announced this as the 9th and final season. So I don't know what my health is going to be like over the next 8 to 10 months. But right now we're holding our own, and that's the best place to be. Now, for those of you watching or listening and wondering, why do I have Jeff on? You probably hear once in a while, either on social media or in the trades, of the passing of a brother or sister. But I think you're going to be sadly surprised at how common that the work Jeff provides is almost as important in some of these departments as is the water in the tanks of the apparatus. So Jeff, let's give them a little background. What got you interested? And by the way, are you keeping track of LODDs as well?
No, I don't follow the line of duty deaths. I compare them to the deaths of our brothers and sisters who died by suicide. So I compare that aspect of it. But no, I don't follow. I hear the stories and I offer my condolences to my friends whose department it's affected by.
Sure.
No, I'm just strictly the stats on those who die by suicide.
So, and sadly enough, those numbers are rising.
They are, and it's been a bad year, and we'll get to our data on stats. But it's truly amazing how it all starts. And I think back and I reflect back. I was a battalion chief most of my career at Palatine Rural, and when they promoted me to assistant chief, they put me on days. And I'm not a day person, and so that only lasted 1 year. And after that, I said to my chief, I said, Chief, I said I need to be back on the rigs for a couple of reasons. One is that I like being on shift work, and the second is that being on days it really limited my ability to go out and speak across the country on
Sure.
behavioral health. It was so passionate for me. So I did go back to my captain's position and work the final couple of years. But actually, everything started for me in 2005 with Hurricane Katrina. As you recall, New Orleans was devastated, the southeast, and Division One outside Chicago sent down numerous firefighters, include many from our brothers and sisters in our department. And when they came back, they showed me pictures and videos. They were picking up bodies in the street and the devastation, and they were struggling, and they needed to go see counselors. Well, this is 2005. Yes, we had employee system programs, EAP, but they were never trained. And that was our fault in the fire service, because of our cultural brainwashing of how we're supposed to act, never show any weakness, never ask for help. So that was just a position that was a benefit for organizations that was never used. And so the counselors really didn't know anything about our world, and so the firefighters never went and sought the help. And I thought, well, how can I give back? And that's when I decided to go back to get my master's degree and became a licensed counselor. And actually, in 2009, I founded Counseling Services for Firefighters. That was an LLC. And that was, I was training counselors and chaplains across the U.S. That if you want to work with us, you need to understand us. We're a little different. Not that it's wrong from my point of view, but we're a little bit different. When in early 2010, I started receiving emails and phone calls from all over the world, actually, asking if I do anything in regard to firefighter suicides. I said, man, I didn't know we had a problem. I've never heard of anything like that. And if it did occur, it was really swept under the carpet. So I did a lot of research, found out this might be a bigger issue than we think. And that's when my bride Karen and I we founded FBHA and started talking about PTS and depression, and of course started tracking and validating the suicides of fire and EMS. And in 2019, we added dispatchers. So it's the things I've learned and heard and carried is plentiful, and I'm a firm believer we need the data to show the reasons why are we taking our lives, and we can discuss all of that today.
Right. And you know what? I forgot to mention at the open that on Tuesday, because I know you had your interview with Chief Arjuna George on Monday, and I was on Tuesday, and I didn't know you guys knew each other already, and I didn't know he had interviewed you the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I want to introduce you to this guy, Jeff Dill, because he tracks firefighter suicides in North America. I said, oh yeah. He says, I interviewed him yesterday. I said, what? You know Jeff already? He goes, yeah. I said, oh, great. Spoiled my surprise. But you know what? He was enthralled by your discussion with him on Monday, and it'll come out soon, folks. So keep an eye out for the episode of Beneath the Helmet from Chief Arjuna George, retired Chief Arjuna George. It'll be out in a few days, and look for Jeff Dill's name because they're both counselors and they're both helping the people we are or should be following and caring for more, and they know the deal. And there's also one of the things we didn't mention as often a precipice is how excluded somebody who is having behavioral health issues to try to keep it away from everybody and think they can bottle it up inside. But we've all done that experiment with Coca-Cola and what's that candy again?
The Pez with the explosion.
Not the Pez, but yeah, with the one with the exterior shell. and you put that in a Coke bottle and
Yeah, the
just,
Pepto-Bismol or
yeah,
something, right?
and clap, get out of the way because you're going to see a 12, 15-foot fountain
Yep.
from just that Coca-Cola mixing with candy. So imagine what happens when the life that we love with our family, our friends, etc., and the life that we love being a part of a fire company or EMS unit sounds great, but only Jeff really knows that my term really great is not being, it's being I'm underscoring that fact as satire because if we don't listen to reports from Jeff and some of the other reports now that are finally popping up in the trades, we would not have any idea of how many brothers and sisters we've lost to their own hand. And that's the saddest part. To their own hand. We understand the LODI. We understand that LODD can happen. But why would a firefighter with a decent department treats them well for the most part? Pay is fair. Why would they take their own life? So, Jeff, let's start with when you first started the FBHA, and you were kind of now a little bit deeper than you were with the first LLC. What did you learn right off the bat when you dove headfirst into this topic?
Well, I'll never forget what makes us different than any organization out there is not only the data collecting, but 90% of all our workshops, and we have 12 nowadays, 90% of it comes from our brothers and sisters. And that's important. It's not things I just pulled off the internet. And so our first four workshops ever were for the Philadelphia Fire Department. And I walked in that first class of about 100 Philly firefighters and said, we'll be talking about PTS and suicide. Uh, I'd never seen so many people shift in their chairs. And I knew right then and there, this is going to be an uncomfortable subject for people. And it is. It still is.
Especially that department, which I know very, very well.
Yeah,
So I
and
can
it's
see that.
still today, even in society, Steve. Talking about behavioral health and suicide is very difficult, and yet the percentages are just rising every year in the United States. And so, I started, coining some phrases like cultural brainwashing, which is it's not a negative term. It's more of, we put this uniform on. This is how we are supposed to act: brave, strong,
Right.
courageous. Give help, don't ask for help. I handle all issues on my own. I don't want to be the weak link of the company. And it's not only us; it's society is brainwashed that way as well. One of a couple of our workshops, either counselors or chaplains or even the families, I always started off by saying, when you hear the term firefighter, what comes to mind? And it's those things that I just listed. And in 15 years, I've yet to hear anyone say, well, they have a lot of anger issues. They drink like fish. They have no communication skills. And so they're brainwashed as well. And yet we know divorce rates are 60 to 65% in the first responder world. And so, this cultural brainwashing that we have, it makes it difficult for us to admit that we are struggling. And that followed with another term that I created called internal size up. And we even named a workshop after it. An internal size up basically to me means we need to ask ourselves two questions every day. Why am I acting this way? Why am I feeling this way? And the best thing that we can do is listen to others because they see us better than we will ever see ourselves. And I've been blessed to be married for 43 and a half years. My wife knows my every facial expression, my tone of voice. And so learn to listen. But we also have to learn to listen to our own bodies when we're not sleeping, when we're having stress and anxiety, when we're starting to get angry at the drop of a hat, when we're struggling with things that we never had before. We turn to an addiction or something. That's our body saying, hey, stop, you need some help. And these are some of the things that that we try to preach in our workshops. And you'd mentioned, it's sad with the numbers that I've collected. What's additionally sad is those organizations then who don't take advantage of behavioral health for their departments, and they're out there, unfortunately. They don't they wait till something happens, and then by that time, of course, it's too late. They've lost someone, or and they're affected by it. They're members. So being proactive in this area is very important, not only for the firefighters but for the families, the survivors, and things. So I keep on learning. We came out with a white paper last year on moral injury, and that's something we'll talk about. And I'm a firm believer now moral injury plays a larger role than post-traumatic stress in the fire service and EMS world and dispatchers. So there's just a lot of things that we're constantly learning, and we have to, because we only started really talking about behavioral health in 2010, and we got beat up pretty bad.
I
There was
remember.
they got a lot of emails and phone calls and think, oh, you're PTS, that's military, and suicide, you're making up the numbers. And, but the fire service has been around since the 1770s or so. So we have a little catching up to do.
Right, right. And unfortunately, their attitude often is, don't believe the man behind the curtain.
Right.
Just I'm the wizard. Don't worry about the man behind the curtain. And we do that. And I think you mentioned something that I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but even a department that suffers an LODD should bring in. They might do a after action review, but that doesn't reach the hearts of a crew or a ship that lost a brother or a sister. And so I think I'd love to see an emphasis added to what you folks do is to help those departments, because we donate to we started, I don't know if we started the corporation in October of 2020, and working with me is Andy Starnes and Nick Higgins from the Firehouse Tribune.
Right.
And I think, I'm going to talk to Nick. Maybe we can promote FBHA in the Firehouse Tribune once in a while.
The IFF, they do a great job with the line of duty desk. They send out some counseling teams. Where we find we struggle with is a lot of the volunteers
Yep.
departments.
Yep.
And,
And I went through
and
that.
yeah, and as you know, 72% of all firefighters are volunteers. So we try to really concentrate on that. FBHA, we've been partners with the NBFC for about 11, 12 years now.
Well, that's great.
And we do a lot of things with them. I'm one of their lead instructors, and I'm on a lot of their committees. And so they're dedicated, to the career as well, but really concentrate on the volunteer side
Right.
of
Right, because it's a little closer to home when it's just people who do it for free for the love of helping their community, as opposed to a career firefighter. And there's nothing wrong with either one, folks. We have many different levels of firefighters today. Part
I
pay.
started.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that you guys are working with NVFC, who we've been promoting their recruitment PSAs. Every podcast, it's either theirs or the one we made in-house. But every podcast, one of those two are always there. And let's talk about, I think this year, in my estimation, here we are, the middle of August, but I think that we've had a strangely higher rate this year. And it started early on too. I mean, the new year wasn't too old before I remember seeing the first notice come out.
Yeah, it's when we look at the data overall, and excuse me, like I said, I have allergies.
No problem.
We estimate about a 65% reporting to FBHA. So there's not a lot of organizations know about us, and it's not like we go out and promote. This is a very personal and private issue. We always believe it's a family issue first. But overall, I have validated 2,083 of these tragic events, with the earliest one being 1877.
Oh, wow.
So, not a lot of people around from 1877 to
I
validate.
feel like
So,
I was.
believe me, right now I do too with these allergies. But those are validated through medical reports or death certificates that families send to us. But from the year 2000 to date, our data, about 96% of the 2083 comes from that time frame. Yeah, 2024 has been a rough year. There's no doubt about it. We're at, I think, about 65, 66, and I still have about 14 still to validate for 2024. We'll be unfortunately over the 100 mark this year. And and what makes it difficult is, out of the 2083, I've personally spoken to about 2020 chief officers or family members to validate the data. So I've heard a lot of stories, and a lot of them are similar, but yet everyone's different, and it affects people differently. The family survivors. So when we collect that data, we're looking at the state, the ages, the ranks, the year, the range in age, the status, whether active, fired, retired, resignation, on duty, injury. Then we get the name, we get the department, we get the method, we get the reasons, and then we get the notes, and then who I spoke to, to validate. And we're very confidential. We don't give out that information unless families say, "Hey, please use our loved ones lost to educate others." And so you'll see our data all over the place. News stations, the USFA, NVFC, NFPA, they use our data, and so do so many officers going to the NFA for academy for their officer classes. They'll do workbooks and things, and they'll ask for our data. So we have to keep it accurate, and then so when I contact the chief and say, "Hey, we got this confidential report that your organization," if they say, "Well, we think he took his life through firearms," and I have to know it's unknown then if they don't know truly what the method or the reason is. And so it, it's challenging. There's no doubt about it. I've heard a lot of stories of our brothers and sisters, and it can be overwhelming for many.
Oh, sure.
But I've been blessed by the good Lord to have that intestinal fortitude to hear these stories, because these are good men and women. These are our brothers and sisters, and that's why I tell people wherever I speak, and I've traveled over 1 million miles the last 10, 11 years across the United
Wow.
States. And I tell them, when you look at the data, please, please don't look at them as numbers. These are the faces and names of our brothers and sisters and the families they left behind. And that's important, that we always remember that aspect of it.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. As I mentioned, when we started the nonprofit, it was during the pandemic, and we saw so many of our brothers and sisters in fire, EMS, and law enforcement who made the ultimate sacrifice to save somebody else and even with the protocols, of course, not everybody used the protocols initially for the first several months, and that boosted, of course, the infection rate. But we decided that we had to help firefighters who have either suffered a serious injury or it's been an LODI. We vet the story. That's basically my job. Nick does it sometimes. But we vet the story, and we vet the person who we can send to. We talk usually to the chief or the assistant chief. And it could be a benevolent society, like we just did for the late firefighter Ty Voss up in where was he? Ty was, I think it was in someplace in the Chicago area, or in someplace in the mid north. And a week and a half ago, they went in. They had a house fire. He was inside, going at it with the hose, and then all of a sudden the hose went limp, and they were doing something else, and they finally found Ty, and he had already succumbed to whatever the issue was. And so we poll the three of us of how much. Then we take that money and we send a check directly to the vetted person, because we don't like giving it to, well, otherwise, for example, for Ty's, we send it to their firefighter benevolent organization. But oftentimes without that, it's difficult for us to then find somebody, because we want to help the family and we can't get the family per se information other than the last name. So we do a little bit more study, learning about the injury or the passing, and that guides us of how much we're going to give. Because people have asked us, well, don't think the state gives them money and the feds give them money? I said, you're absolutely right. They've been doing that since I started in the fire service in '77. However, there's a lot of red tape between the time that the death becomes public to you getting those benefits. And so we send a check somewhere above $100, and we've gone considerably higher than that. But to get cash to that family, just a check. We don't do credit cards. Everything's a check. And they have that to at least tide them over for the first couple of weeks. And that's what we want to do. And hopefully by that time, whoever their ambassador is between the department and the state and federals, most often the chief, but it could be an assistant chief as well, that we get that information out and that we learn from it. And that's the other issue I have. As you said, neither of the three arms of first responders, fire service, EMS, and our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, they all are kind of loath to making too much about the issue public. But the department, the families in the department, in the community, the people in the community, firefighters near that community, firefighters, EMS, first responders near that community, they all have to be considered, because sadly, and maybe you'll either tell me I'm wrong or I'm right, that sometimes one of our brothers and sisters in those three arms hears about somebody else doing it, and they read the posting on social media, LinkedIn and Instagram and X, and they say, well, wait a second, I'm feeling the same way. I could do it too. That we got to stop. We can't let these be positive influences for the rest of our brothers and sisters.
Oh, you're correct on that, Steve, and I think that's why, though, it is also difficult for so many to talk about it, because they see themselves in that situation and say, "Wow, if my brother or sister could take their life, could I ever get to that desperate situation where life is so challenging?" And there's another term I coined. It's called cognitive disconnect, and what that means is that we are basing our decisions on the emotions that we're going through at that moment. So let me give you an example. In your career, have you ever come across, that one firefighter that when they put the uniform on, they act like they walk on water? And they're wearing
several of those.
Right, they're wearing their T-shirt and their logo, and then they go into the store, and people are, "Thank you for what you do. You're heroic. You're courageous. Our children want to be like you." And you have parades, and the large ambulances and the the towers and the engines are going by, and we're throwing out candy, and we got water pistols, and everyone loves us. Then this firefighter goes home to the person who knows them the best, and does not put them on that pedestal. And then maybe in the heat of an argument, the thought process is why can't you treat me like John Q. Public? And the anger gets so bad that they pull out a gun and shoot their loved one and then themselves, murder-suicide. We have about 68, 69 cases of that. But it doesn't have to be anger. It could be depression. It could be some struggles from post-traumatic stress, whatever the emotion is, guilt, jealousy. That's why if they're not doing that internal size up, and at that moment they're probably not because this other emotion has taken over. Their thought is, well, my family would be better off, or you know what, I need to get rid of this pain. And so it's so damn difficult to say that suicide is always preventable. I'm not a fan of that statement. I think it's very difficult. Uh, what it does is it puts guilt in the survivors that, oh, if it's always preventable, and
I
you
missed
know
it.
my love, I missed it, and it
Yeah.
must be my fault that they took their lives because I didn't see it. And so it's very difficult. The only way it's truly preventable is if that person does that internal size up, sees the problem, and gets the help. And so this emotions that overwhelm people at that moment, it's very difficult if no one's there to stop them.
And that's part of the sad part. And I think most of them don't want to talk in the firehouse because they're afraid, even if they have a good friend that they can confide in, they're afraid somebody else might hear it and might get
Right.
out.
And judge them, right? And
Exactly.
judge. And judge that, hey, you know what? Am I going to be known as weak? Will they trust me to back them up in a fire because I showed a little emotion and things? And so these are the challenges that we have in the fire service as leaders of fire departments, organizations, is to really promote behavioral health, and yet we still have problems with it because and I've seen it. I've seen it in our data, Steve. A firefighter will stand up and say, "Hey, you know what? I'm struggling with an addiction. I need to go get help." And everyone claps and says, "Oh, congratulations, go get the help." And then they're gone for 35, 40 days. And then they come back and everyone's, "Oh, wait, they're coming back to our shift. Can we trust them? Will they break down on a call or something?" And that puts that doubt in that person who went and got help, thinking, well, did I do the right thing? Because we've lost people to suicide because of that. They felt that when they came back, they were alienated. They had there wasn't enough confidence in their abilities, and yet we all applauded them when they went and got sought help. So it's a two-part problem that we have in regard to that aspect.
Right. So both the people and the department are kind of like batting very low
Right.
because there's no connect between them. Actually, as you just said, it's more of a disconnect
Mhm.
that happens even if they've gone through the treatments, the meetings, and the doctor or the therapist, where it was, cleared them and said, yes, this is what he or she does have issues with, but there is no, I detect absolutely no, signs of possible self-demise. And so at
Well,
that point, what do you do?
well, like I said, upon their return, there has to be some type of acceptance by those that they work with, saying, "Hey, we believe in you. We still have the confidence in you. We want to work with you, and not kind of alienate them in some aspect." And I'm not saying it happens in every case, but
Right.
unfortunately, we've lost brothers and sisters that where this has happened, and that's they did the right thing. They stood up, they got the help, and yet when they came back, they felt like, hey, you know what? No one has any confidence in my abilities, and so there's challenges abound when it comes to behavioral health in the first responder world. And you look at our dispatchers. I mean, they our dispatchers handle over 500,000 calls a year.
They
Between
are the true first responders.
and you're hearing the parents screaming that their child is drowned or not breathing, and they're affected deeply. And so, dispatchers, we've lost two this year, so that I know of, and it's the challenges are just amazing out there. That what every organization needs to be prepared to take care of their people.
The scenario you just talked about looks like it came right from the first couple of scripts of the show 911. I only started watching it relatively recently because I haven't really trusted other fire programs. Chicago Fire, don't trust. A couple of weeks after, I think it was, no, maybe a month after they started shooting, the battalion chief, I think it was, or assistant chief from Chicago, walked out and said, you're not depicting us, so you go do what you want, but I'm out of here. And you'll have no more connection with the city of Chicago. And we've had several others that just didn't tell the story. But, you have a story in 911 where the new captain in California at LA City had a problem. He was a drunkard in Minnesota. And he went through, sober treatment and he got sober, but he had a couple of setbacks as well. But it talks about that his crew, I mean, they learned quickly at the beginning of the first season that the chief had a secret, the captain had a secret. And they portray it very well in the show of what he was going through, why he went through it, et cetera, why he goes to church every day that he can to try to get himself redeemed from the accident in the Chicago area, in Minnesota area. So I think if we can get more information to our fire and EMS departments and in an educational way, don't want to berate them, what they haven't done, we're better off to educate them. And you've been a teacher for a long time now. I've been a teacher for well over 50 years. And when you educate somebody, it's totally different than yelling and screaming at them, thinking they're going to follow you because you were loud.
Right.
Loudness doesn't necessarily get the message across.
No, and one of the things that we started doing about a year and a half ago, we go in and we consult with fire departments on creating behavioral health programs. And it's pretty complete. It includes workshops. We do them for families. We do them for the counselors in the area. We help then create guidelines and policies for those organizations, which are important. Excuse me. It's important to have guidelines and policies so that everyone knows what's going to happen when this, or this happens. And so, with the new OSHA regulations that are proposed to coming out in regard to behavioral health, you have to have these things in place. So, like I said, we started a year and a half ago saying, hey, these are some of the steps, and it gives your people. And it's not only for administration to let you know what's going to happen, it's for the individual member to know.
Right.
If, I seek help or something, I know what the steps are. I know where the resources are. What we do in Las Vegas, I put on all our resources, our chaplains, our counselors, our peer support team members, our inpatient facilities, library of books that I have. I put it all on QR codes. And it's right there for our members on their phone. And I update it on my computer, so it goes live right into their updated QR codes. So there's so many things that you can do that offer the resources for the people right then and there.
Right. So are you ready with some numbers for part two of our interview?
When we get back, we'll talk about the data, and then we'll also talk about moral injury as well.
Very good. I was going to ask that we could discuss this when we came back. So folks, if you're watching the video, you won't see anything different. If you're listening to the audio, you know it's going to come. We'll have a few PSAs. Then we're going to be back with our guest, Jeff Dill of the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, as we talk more about how to protect ourselves and the men and women that we work with. And again, this is, although Jeff's company deals specifically with fire and EMS, a lot of these, almost everything that we talk about affects our brothers and sisters in law enforcement as well. So we're trying to paint with a little wide brush here the impact that these have truly, we know, on the family, on his or her crew, his or her department, but it goes beyond that. Goes beyond that. And I'll tell you, for me, why I need that, and that's so important. So we'll be right back with our guest, Jeff Dill, right after these words. As always, please stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of 511 Task Force. My guest today is a returning guest. Every time he's here, he brings such important information. Some of you are very interested in information, and some of you said, that's BS. That can't all be true. You better find a way to get in the middle of that, because every firefighter, career, volunteer, part pay, paid on call, WUI, every single one of you out there needs to know what Jeff is talking about and how you can avoid making the left turn when you know you're really supposed to make the right. And so in this segment of the podcast with Jeff, we're going to be hit with some numbers. Many of you may not believe them at the outset. But I can tell you, having worked with Jeff before, every figure he puts on pen to paper, every one has been efficiently and deeply vetted, not just from the first responders' family, but from their station chief or battalion chief or shift supervisor and EMS, anything like that. They need to know what Jeff's organization can bring to your department to hopefully help your firefighters or your EMS personnel in general, but hopefully it will strike home with several of those who may really need it, but you don't know about that. So, Jeff, I'm going to turn the abacus over to you, and let's hear what you have to say.
Well, yeah, it is amazing just listening to you, you talking about the challenges that, departments have and families have. And I can say the one thing about our data is there's no discrimination. It doesn't matter if you're a career volunteer, it doesn't matter if you're suburban, rural, city, it does not matter gender, it doesn't matter rank, ages. And let me first clarify on what I actually track and who I track, which is, of course, firefighters, which is career volunteer. We track wildland firefighters. We track military firefighters. So I've spoken at about 14 Air Force bases. In 2019, I had the pleasure and I was invited to speak at the Pentagon by a brigadier general from the Air Force. We track EMS and we track dispatcher suicides. And early on, the reports would come in off our webpage. People would fill out the report, submit it, and the emails are scrubbed. So I had no idea where they came from. But I would then call the department chief to validate the report. But because I've traveled over 1,000,000 miles, I've spoken at every conference in the United States, that people will call me now or they'll text me and say, "Hey Jeff, our department just lost someone last night." And so it still stays confidential. I never give up the names because it's like a peer support team.
Right.
If you're a peer support team member who gives up some information, that team's done for 10 years. And so you have to maintain that confidentiality. Otherwise, you're done and all our work is done with it. But, you know, when people look at it, like if we look at methods, we're at 1,199 of those died by firearms. And then the second known is hanging. And I, first off, let me apologize. I don't know my audience, whether it's I'm speaking in front of 50 or 900, who's been affected by suicide. And it's not my intent to upset you. But the intent is also to make sure that we know and we remember, and it's best known the reasons why. And so when we look at firearms, of course, being number one, what's really the oddity in regard to our data is that we know in society firearms is number one for males and overdose is number one for females. But in our data, the number one method for both male and females is firearms
Hmm.
by almost a 2-to-1 method for
Wow.
females. And it just makes me think: is it due to that our female fire and EMS they're on those calls and they see 99.9999% of the time it's a success, a completed suicide, or is it because they fall prey to the cultural brainwashing of how they're supposed to act in a male dominant career? That not only do they work that way, but they die that way. Now, I can't, I don't know that for a fact, but I know I have the data that shows that. And so having that data is just absolutely incredible. We know that the number one state for suicides reported is Illinois, followed by Florida. Florida only
Wow.
it's only by one.
Wow.
And so you look at the top five, which of course are California, Illinois, Florida, Texas, and Pennsylvania. So it's it's really the data is just it's mind-boggling to what we can abstract out of it and pull. But I think the most important part of the data is the reasons. Unknown is the number one known reason. When I talk to the fire chiefs or family members, they just don't know unless they left a note or whatever the issue they were dealing with. But the number one known reason why, by far, is relationships, whether personal relationships or working relationships that cause that member to take their lives. Number two is depression, and number three is post traumatic stress. Does PTS have a role in all aspects? Could be. Absolutely could be. We know based on what we see and do is traumatic in all aspects of our lives. But there are others. I mean, there's financial, there's legal issues, there's addictions, there's medical, both behavioral health wise or physical, why members take their lives. And so we have to understand that, as you see in the fire service, in particular in EMS, is that everything is PTS. You go to conferences, it's all PTS, post traumatic stress related. We need to start understanding these relationships and depression and addictions and start talking about those, writing articles about that, because to truly understand and encompass all that we struggle with, we have to discuss that legal issues. And if we know someone's going through that, to be aware that this could be a reason why our member takes their lives. And that gets to the aspect of moral injury. So two firefighters from Las Vegas, they called me up in September of 21 and said, Jeff, can you come out to the station? We want to show you a video. And it was a TED talk about a doctor talking about moral injury in first responders. And they said, well, have you heard about it? I said, well, yeah, being a licensed counselor, but we never really talked about it because it's not in the DSM-5, the book that helps diagnose and treat behavioral health issues. But so I did a lot of research and talked to a lot of people, including the military, who had been doing studies on moral injury. And I concluded that, you know what, we need a white paper. And for those who don't know what a white paper is, it's a professionally written paper that can be accepted into the medical journal review across the United States. So I thought, well, we need a white paper, but that brought challenges because uh, I'll never forget my first class for my master's degree. Professor, I forgot what the subject was, and he put an A on it, big red A on it. He got an A on the paper, but then he put "See me," and it was circled. I thought, oh, this brings me back to my high school years when I was just a god awful student. I played sports, so that's all I cared about in high school. So I asked him. I said, well, I got this paper that says "See me." He says, Jeff, he said, in all my years in master's program, I've never seen a first responder come through for a counselor. And your perspective on the, the points of the paper were just enlightening. He said, but he said, you'll never write a white paper. This is 2008 or 2007. I said, well, it's not my intent to write a white paper. I want to be a counselor to help out my brothers and sisters. But I asked him, so, well, why? He said, because you speak and write from the heart. And that's not what white papers are. White papers are long words and long syllable words, and I don't speak that way. So lo and behold, when I wanted to do this white paper, I thought, well, this is a problem. So I have a good friend, Liz Fletcher, out of Texas. She's a doctor down in Houston, and she is a volunteer fire captain. She's a chaplain. I called her. I said, Liz, I said, I know you've written white papers. Would you be interested in writing a white paper, helping me on moral injury for firefighters? She said, absolutely. So great. So meanwhile, I'm doing this research and I'm talking to different doctors. And one of the doctors I talked to was out of Boston University, created the moral injury outcome scale. It's a survey to see how you're struggling with moral injury. And so I called the doctor back after our conversation. I said, well, I'm thinking about doing a white paper. Can I use your MIOS to send out to fire departments for the survey? And he said, oh, absolutely, you can. So that's what we did. And as they started coming in, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, I don't know what the hell this says. I said, because, I'm not an authority on this. So I went and I found, we call them chaps. His name's Mark Schlemmingflang. It's a long, like 26.
All right, Smith. We'll go with Smith.
So we just call him chaps. He runs the moral injury unit at Rush Memorial in Chicago for first responders and veterans. And I said, Chaps, I said, would you like to be on our team? Because as this surveys come in, you can interpret what they're saying. And so that was our team. And we came out with our white paper on moral injury. And for those who don't know what that is, excuse me, moral injury is the inherent belief that we are all born to do good. It's just inherent in us. Now you get into the first responder world, and we're trained to save lives. Well, over this past year, speaking across the country, I've asked this question of our brothers and sisters, and I asked, what do you think our percentage is of actually saving lives? And the consensus was about 6% or less. Because by the time we get there for the full arrest, the drownings, the shootings, the vehicle accidents, the suicides, it's too late. And so this starts affecting us emotionally. Like, hey, you know what? I feel helpless. I'm here to do this. Did all this training, and yet I'm not doing what I thought I was supposed to do. So one of the key aspects of moral injury is betrayal. Betrayal by management, betrayal by others, betrayal by ourselves. So when we look at management, let's just take, for instance, how many firefighters had to leave the job because they didn't get vaccinated for COVID, right? At Seattle, LA, you see pictures of them carrying their boots in to City Hall and things. So that betrayal is just because I don't want to get vaccinated, I have to lose my job. Or maybe, hey, you promised us better pay, better working conditions, more people so we don't have to work all this awful overtime hours. Betrayal by others. Maybe how the competition is when you're doing promotional periods. I mean, it gets pretty competitive, and there's a lot of rumors that start about different abilities of people. So you start feeling betrayed, or maybe betrayed by a loved one, a family that wants a divorce. Or betrayal by ourselves. Maybe we saw someone being abused or harassed in our department and we didn't say anything. Or maybe we went out and had an affair and all of a sudden now our loved one wants a divorce and our kids don't want to be with us. So that betrayal by ourselves. Where PTS is fear-based and trauma-based, moral injury is more emotional effects. The guilt, the shame, the helplessness, the betrayal. And when I started asking the military, I said, you've been studying this for years for your soldiers. They said, you can actually have PTSD and moral injury at the same time. They're two different things. And I started looking at my data, and I looked at those losses of brothers or sisters who went to inpatient facilities for either PTSD, addictions, depression. And when they came out, they still ended up killing themselves. And it made me think, was the PTS addressed, but not the moral injury aspect of it? And so when I asked the military, I said, when you looked at your data, where was the highest contribution to suicides of soldiers? And they said, by far, it was to moral injury. And so when I started putting all this together, and then I reflected on what was the number one known reason for our brothers and sisters killing themselves, and it was relationships. So I'm thinking, wow, this is a connection that we need to make sure that we explore in the first responder world, because that's where it's hitting us, is our emotions, from the things that we see and do and we feel in our personal lives as well as our work lives. And so, wounds of the spirit, moral injury, we came out with it. We're actually in the middle of white paper two, and that is the treatment for moral injury. And I will tell you, it's simple, but it's not. We're interviewing counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists who treat moral injury to get a good assessment of it. And one of the key aspects is the ability to forgive. And that's, like I said, that's easier said than done, to forgive others or to forgive ourselves. And so that's where we stand with moral injury. You can download it for free off our webpage. Just scroll down on the front page. You can download that moral injury, wounds of the spirit, that white paper. And I ask departments to share with your counselors, your chaplains, your peer support teams, your members, so that they know what moral injury is and how it can affect people very, very quickly.
I certainly understand that. I didn't understand it early enough, but back in '85, I was in my second department because we had moved from North Carolina, which was a great department. And we moved up outside of Syracuse and I joined the department there. And it was some of the people really nice, but I was an outsider. But I still loved, I was working 80 hours a week. I still made the top 10% of calls every month. And then I had already had my knee operated on twice. And after 3 years, just after 3 years, it gave way again. And at that point, both my orthopedist and the fire surgeon for department said, you can't fight fires anymore. I said, well, what do you mean? Let me just get this fixed up and I'll come back. He goes, no, this will be your fourth, this will be your third operation on this knee. And at that point, and I knew the orthopedist very well. He was a member of our synagogue. We would hang out together sometimes at the synagogue. We'll go out and just have a bite to eat. So we were personal friends as well. And he said, but Steve, I just can't let you in good conscience go back, because what if you're coming downstairs? What if you're carrying somebody downstairs and your knee gives way like that? So I had to give it up. It was like a knife through my heart, because the 8 years, I really felt connected as volunteer firefighter. Now, unfortunately, in the second department, I couldn't do anything but drive the Suburban. Now, I came up from North Carolina, being able to drive 750-gallon Pierce pumper, a 3,000-gallon tanker, or ladder called SQ, a squirt.
Squirt.
Yeah,
Squirt.
a big a Pierce engine with a 75-foot squirt tower, ladder and tower at the end. So I was certified on all those to drive. When I went up to upstate New York, showed them all my cards, and my cards were all state certified, not department certified, state certified. You're going to have to earn that. And then the only thing they would let me learn was how to drive the Suburban and plow the snow.
Right.
So I dealt with it. For that last year, they made me a fire inspector, sent me to several of the classes. Then I did that year as an inspector. But a year ago, a little over a year ago, one of our juniors and mine, good friends, is Andy Clark, based in Toronto. And after we did the interviews with her, I asked if I could talk with her personal one-on-one, whatever had to be paid was fine. And she set it up. And we did the evaluation. And she wrote back to me her basic observations, but wanted to talk with me unpaid to explain something. And what she told me is, you have two major traumas in your life. The first was when you were in Boston and you tried to help your father who was in cardiac distress. And when the ambulance got there, you found out that other than the city of Boston, no other communities in the state of Massachusetts were cleared to run paramedics. The city of Boston could, Boston City Health and Hospitals, they were allowed to. And so I told them when they first came up, get me the scope, get me the EKG, get me the drug box, because I had been in New York State. That's where I had come from. I was still living in New York State. And that we had it. Every fire station had paramedics, even volunteers like us. And that didn't float with them. So she called me back and she said, so those traumas are, you weren't able to save your dad because he went into VTAC and there was no way to
Right.
reset it.
Right.
I've gone to the hospital. He lived for, we got him into the ER. He made it through the ER, went upstairs to CCU, went up to see him. He was fine. He kept telling me, aren't you supposed to get a haircut for your interview for the high holidays? And I said, yes, Pop, I promise. I will go to get the haircut. It's already scheduled at my cousin's salon. And he said, okay. I went to the salon. I hadn't been there 5 minutes. The phone rings. My cousin answers it, and she gives it to me. It's my younger brother who's at the hospital, said, you better get back here fast. By the time I got there, my dad was gone. So that always haunted me. I didn't blame it on myself because it wasn't my fault. I had the knowledge and the ability to help him, but I wasn't allowed to. And it haunted me for a long time. But when I spoke with this woman, Andy, she said the two major traumas in your life are not physical. Yes, you've had multiple knee surgeries and you've had your back surgeries, but your major traumas come from life. I said, I didn't have any major traumas in life. She goes, oh, remember you told me the story that you couldn't save your dad because they didn't have paramedics in the rest of the state of Massachusetts? I said, yes. She goes, that's a trauma for you. That was a trauma for you. Because my dad has first heart attack when he was 44. So, he got to 69. He made 15 years. No, 40. He made 26 years out of it. And I said, well, you said there's a second one. She goes, yeah. Actually, which was your first one, is that you were shut down at the new department. They wouldn't let you do what you knew. And since I validated my license in the state of New York as well. But she goes, they made you stop being a firefighter. And that is at the core because it had become so important to you. I said, but it still is. She goes, I know. But the only way you do it now is when you first or second stop at a scene where you're the first or second first responder there. Because I've always carried a full BLS complement in every vehicle I've had since I got disabled out. And he says, so I knew you're going to stop with that, but that's not going to bring back what you lost back in 85. So I said, okay. And I live with that. I'm coping with it. I've always been dealing with it in the back of my mind. And when my buddy who I met at that department in 77, who's still my best friend today, and he's chief pilot for a county fire sheriff's office here in the state of Florida. So I know what I've been told I went through. I didn't see them as traumas then. We didn't even talk about. I mean, trauma in '85 was still boys and women coming back from Vietnam and other places. Um, so everybody knew what PTSD was supposedly, which we know, 20, 30 years later, that was off, wasn't quite on the bullseye. And I've tried to use what I went through when I talk with students that I teach, or I'm teaching, if I'm asked to speak at a teacher's conference. I talk about the unseen and unknown traumas that our kids go through from third grade to high school, because that's who I was teaching. And I learned from some of them. Some of them needed special education. And so my wife, Ruth, and I, and by the way, will be 50 years in October, 2 months
Oh,
away.
congratulations.
Well, yeah. I don't know why the hell she stayed, but after what I put her through, but she is my queen, that's for sure. Um, and so I've learned to live with it. And this is only about a little over a year, but I kind of hold my head higher because I had the knowledge. And I sent a scathing letter to the governor, scathing letter. And in it, he actually admitted maybe we have been too slow in allowing our communities to have their own paramedics. I said, and I wrote back to him, "You're damn straight." Exclamation point, Steve. And that was it. I got another letter back to him. Goes, "I'm sorry it came this way. I apologize," as the governor. So that kind of helped me a little bit, but I knew that it would help others behind me who were in the same predicament.
You bring up a great point because, whether the trauma is physical or mental, where we really see stuff in our data, we track retirees, those that have resigned or fired on duty injuries. And you know as well as I do, 25 years goes in a heartbeat. And so when we looked at our retired data, especially, almost 10% of our retirees took their lives within the first week of retirement. And that's a problem. And so I interviewed recent retirees and found the three top issues were loss of identity, loss of belonging, and lack of purpose. Because this is the only thing that they knew for
Yep.
20, 25, 30 years. Volunteers, 40, 45, 50 years. And those issues that I just spoke of, they speak to moral injury. Those are things that they believed in their heart and their emotions of, I can't believe it's over. And so we, when we, like I said, when we do a behavioral health program, consult with departments, we really emphasize the retirement aspect of it. What are we doing to help out our retirees? What program do we have? Because when I interviewed those 127 recently retirees, the average age was 53.4. They got 25, 30 years left to still live. How are we going to make sure that they know it's productive, what they're supposed to look out for within their own behavioral health needs? And so we just constantly learn from, unfortunately, we learn from our losses. And, will we ever get to zero? No, because this is society. It's just people and human beings. But if we can start getting reductions, and we had seen them for the last couple of years, but like I said, this year we'll be up over 100, and that's disturbing based on just the economy that we're living in and the issues that people see in their daily lives. And so you encompass that with the first responder world, what they see there, it's a bad combination. So we need organizations to be very proactive in behavioral health. The problem with that, though, Steve, is that I think we've inundated the market on behavioral health to the point where that's all we see anymore. And, in 2010, when we started talking about it, Facebook, there's no organizations on Facebook talking about the things. And And now you go on Facebook, social media, there's thousands of new organizations for first responders and behavioral health. And it takes 1,000 organizations to help out our brothers and sisters. But I think some people start feeling, well, we see it so all the time, it just becomes accepted. That, oh yeah, well, we're going to lose someone, and it becomes accepted, and we're not putting that emphasis on the behavioral health programs that organizations should have.
Right.
And I was thinking about writing an article about complacency kills. We know that in the fire service, you go into a car fire or a dumpster fire, you better be packed up and wearing everything just in case something goes wrong. Well, in same thing in the behavioral health. We need to be proactive. We need to make sure that there are programs within every organization across the U.S. because there's no discrimination, like I said. We had one volunteer department lost 2 people in 5 days to, that completed suicide. So that's a problem, and we need to make sure that they have the proper resources, they have the education, their families are aware of what's going on, and so this is our mission, and we'll keep on going until the good Lord says it's time to stop. So
So with that said, let's talk about some of the numbers we're seeing over the past couple of years and where we see it going, unfortunately or fortunately.
yeah, our high was back in 2015. We had 162 fire and EMS that completed suicide. And you've probably seen it in articles where people said that there was more suicides in line of duty deaths. And there was a straight 6 years where we had more suicides in line of duty deaths, and then COVID hit. And we lost a lot of members to COVID, which became line of duty deaths.
Right.
And we saw our numbers
But we had
start.
to twist, excuse me, we had to twist their hands in many of those communities to give them that honor that they died doing their job,
Right.
because they all want to absolve themselves from any responsibility. Fact is, they're your employee, they're your responsibility.
No, and absolutely, and so we saw numbers uh, somewhere around the 98 to 100, but this year with what I have, the number wise, and what I still have to validate, and it's only mid-August, I'm afraid we'll be up near about a 120, and that's unacceptable. I mean, yes,
Agreed.
we're not going to get to zero, but we need to make sure it's not only the organization though, it's also the education of the members, and I'm in awe still of how many people don't know anything about our organization, and it's difficult. I mean, like I said, it's not like we go out and say, hey, if you had a suicide, call us. We're not ghostbusters. And so it's those type of things, and also we struggle like every 501(c)(3) when it comes to financial. People don't people just don't give to organizations in regard to suicide. I mean,
They
it's
don't. Here we are trying to help firefighters who are injured or their family after a line of duty death, and it's very difficult. I think I've only picked up from two viewers and listeners, two people about that thing who made a donation through our portal on the homepage of the picture of the um, the Q
right.
license on the page.
And I understand. It's also for me, it's an ethical issue. I find it very difficult, just because the way I was raised. My parents are still alive; they're 91 and 86,
God bless.
and I find it very difficult to ask for money on the deaths of my brothers and sisters. Yeah, and so, but people say, but Jeff, you got to keep your organization going, for all the good that you've done. So, but you just can't get major organizations, major donors to give to small little organizations like us. They give to the NFF and the IFF and the NVFC and things. They give, big money, and we don't get that. And
Well, we
so
don't.
it's tough to stay alive as an organization, to do what you have to do when there's no funds, and so every day is a challenge for us, Steve, and it's a challenge that we've accepted because, like I said, the good Lord put us on this path. But one day it'll probably end because there's no funding for it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
And
that's
that would
just
be a tremendous loss for the fire service, a tremendous loss. Um, if you are a listener or a viewer of this episode of Five Alarm Task Force with our guest, Jeff Dill of the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance, and you want to help them because you have a good heart and nobody's asking for $1 million endowment. As you heard me say to Jeff, we've have a very difficult time since we started our nonprofit. And the only thing we do with the money in the nonprofit foundation account is we send it to first responders who have been severely injured or made the ultimate price to get some money, quick money to their family without going through funds and red tapes and stuff like that. We vet it and we do it. And Jeff's organization is true. If you think firefighters save lives, well, we're talking about now saving firefighters' lives. And if you can't understand that, because you know what, folks? When you call 911, first, the majority of 911 calls go for fire rescue, not for police. And if you call 911 because you have an emergency at your home or your business, you dial 911, and the first people who are going to show up most likely are going to be the firefighters of your community. These are the people who take care of you and perhaps might even be saving you one day. But you have the emotional goal of helping them out. Would they love a $10,000? Would we love a $10,000? Sure, we would, but we're not asking for that. I'm happy if you send $5. Here at the three people here that run our nonprofit, and Jeff and his wife running theirs, we're not asking for 10,000. We'd like it, but we're not asking for it. We want you to give what you can. And if it's $5, we'll take it, guaranteed, and we'll send you a nice thank you note, as will the folks at FBHA. But you have to take it into your heart. If you like seeing those firefighters come down the street with the lights on, the siren, or the rescue comes by and you're out there with your child and he waves and they give him a little siren honk or the horn, whatever, that's the payback. That's all we ask is that $5 makes all of us happy because that allows us to help another family in first responders' life. So just as you heard Jeff say, so far this year, here we are, August 18th, 19th today, right? 19th?
16.
16th. 16th today. We don't have any regular givers. Now, we have one job only. We don't do anything but get fast cash to a firefighter who's suffered a line of duty injury that's significant, traumatic, or to the family of a firefighter who made the ultimate sacrifice. So we can help them. None of the money that you donate to us goes to anything but that disbursement, helping firefighters in dire need. Jeff and his wife, and I said Jeff was one of my first guests, I think in late 2016, early 2017. So he was in that first roll call. And they're the same way. You just heard him say it. He has a tough time asking for monetary assistance for something that he has the passion to do. I'm the same way. I don't take any money out of the funds for this department.
Well, we have to charge for our workshops
Right.
because we hold an annual weekend retreat for family survivors, which is probably one of the most powerful weekends you can ever imagine. These are families that come together from across the United States. It's always the third week in May, the third weekend in May, and we have it all over the place. We have our 10th annual one scheduled in Orlando area next May, and it costs us, $17 to $20,000 to put that on. And so, that's why we have to charge. I mean, like I said, we don't get the major funding. If we could, we'd offer everything we could for free.
Agree.
But we just don't, unfortunately. And then, of course, on that Friday night, which is always the third Friday of May, we hold a nationwide We Remember night where organizations across the U.S. pull their rigs out on their apron and they run their lights for 1 minute at 9 o'clock local time.
Some of us
And
pull our cars out too.
yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the most powerful weekends. And that's what we do here at FBHA. Our family survivors, like I said, some of the bravest people I've ever met, they will welcome in new family members that have lost a loved one, and they bond with them, they connect with them,
Oh,
they
sure.
talk with them, they share each other's pains, but also their hopes and their laughters. And so we find counselors for our brothers and sisters. I do that for free. If they call and say, yeah, I live in, Buck City, Michigan or something, and I will find vetted counselors for them. So there's a lot that we do at FBHA, and like I said, we'll keep on going for as long as the good Lord allows us.
And that's important. I think your family program is the week after the NFF, NF, and Triple F.
Yeah, yeah, they moved theirs to May, so ours is a week or two afterwards, right? Like I said, ours is always the third. It's usually Wednesday through Sunday, the third week of May.
Yeah. And you know what? That's good because the families that the NFFF help need that closure some of the closure they can get by being together with other families of firefighters who made the ultimate sacrifice. And the same thing happens with Jeff's conference. They bring together people with questions, or I think I heard this in our department. What am I supposed to think about it?
Right.
Now, I don't consider that being dumb. I think I show that being concerned.
No, absolutely. And like I said, the mixtures of emotions from anger to pain to grief to laughter that occurs during these weekend retreats with families is incredible. We go out and do projects during the week or during the retreat. And like I said, after that first one that we had in Savannah, Georgia, way back when, I was really surprised when I was talking to a few of them. They said, "Oh yeah, we send Christmas cards to each other and things." And I thought that's what it's supposed to be there for is to bond and support each other. Even
Right.
to this, those first groups they're all together. They wish each other happy birthdays and on the anniversary of their losses, they share their hearts and things. So they're incredible people, and so like I said, we're just trying to do our little part here in the world and the first responders of making sure that they don't take their lives, but also take care of the families.
Right. Right. I'm just trying to remember. I wrote the article. The name of the topic I wrote on my edit sheet was Are We Behaving? And we've discussed this morning two methods of behavior. Those who need help that you provide, and those who need help that don't reach out.
Right, right. And what's important is we talked about internal size up. I think it's important for our brothers and sisters in the first responder world that you can do that internal size up with your support system at home, whether it's your son, a daughter, a loved one, a wife, spouse, partner. And what that does, doing the internal size up, means you can sit together at night and say, "Hey, what emotions did I, display today? How did I act out on it, and how did it affect you?" And then the other person can do the same thing, and it opens up these lines of communication that they're allowed to talk about it, and it makes it more comfortable. to talk, and you're building your relationships, since we know divorce rates are so high in our world.
Sure.
So the ability to talk about these emotions is key for success, first responder, because one of our mantras at FBHA is, "Hey, I want you to have a great career, but I want you to have a better retirement." And so that, tell my brothers and sisters, hey, do that internal size up with a loved one. Talk about those emotions that you're dealing with. So,
I say when I see the retirement notice on social media, I'll post wishing them uh, a long and healthy retirement filled with love, family, and maybe a few hobbies.
there you go.
There you
Yep.
go. So that will do it. So, Jeff, I can't thank you enough. Before we break away, could you share with our viewers and listeners the best ways they can reach out to you folks?
No, absolutely. And there's several different ways. If you go to our webpage at, of course, www.ffb as in Bravo, ha.org, and you'll find all my contact information there. My email, my phone number's on there. If you need to call me regarding finding a counselor or just some questions about our workshops, or you can join us just on Facebook. Facebook is Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. I do videos on there. We put important information, especially weekend retreats for the family survivors. So if you've suffered a loss and within your own personal family, if you have a brother or a sister or a parent that has died by suicide, was a first responder, give us a call. We have a closed group of survivors that support each other on Facebook. So that's the way to find us.
That's great. And I thank you for that. I thank you for your time this morning out in a place is even hotter than we are here in South Florida. We're now in our 18th day straight of high heat warnings in South Florida. So, feels like 110, 115. That's
Yeah,
been for over half a month already.
since May, we've been above 105, and then there was a stretch of about 8 days where we had above 118. So
Whoa.
it
Ouch.
was it was pretty hot. But we're it's starting to get down to like 106, 105. At night, it's getting close to the 79, 80 mark. So we're coming into a great part of the season now for Las Vegas, which is end of mid-September to mid-May or so. So it's
Right.
very, very enjoyable times out here.
All right. So when we take a break, please don't disconnect because I have something to ask you. But again, our sincere thanks to Jeff Dill, who is really the only one in this country who is keeping this kind of data so that the rest of us who should know it can know it because of the work that he and his wife do to help firefighters and EMS workers. And we hope, and maybe you already know, but we hope there's a great organization that helps our men and women in blue because they're out there just like we are. They've seen the same crap that we do, but they do their jobs to the very best of the ability. And very rarely, very rarely do we ever find a patient holding a loaded gun. But the job they do when they're going to called in to meet EMS, meet fire on the scene, there's a good likelihood that any of us could meet an armed patient. As a matter of fact, it wasn't but a couple of months ago, EMS team responded to a home. The guy was a little bit belligerent, but it wasn't bad. They put him on the gurney, put him into the bus, started driving away, and as the paramedic was starting, I don't know, paramedic or an EMT, was starting the line, he pulled the gun out from under his shorts pocket and shot the EMT and shot himself. So we don't know what to expect in any call. If you're in the fire service, I'm sure your mentor, your trainer, your chiefs have told you. Don't assume that what you hear on the dispatch is exactly the way you're going to find it when we get on the scene. Always keep your head on a swivel. And of course, as Chief Richard Gasway has told us over and over, keep your head on that swivel, pardon me, something in the way of my eye tooth, and I couldn't see what I was saying. But he recommends that all of us in emergency services keep our head and keep situational awareness from the moment you climb onto your apparatus, while you get off and start treating. You still must keep situational awareness in your head or a colleague's head who's standing with you on the swivel, so you don't get any surprises. That's all we can ask for. But you know that we have great people in all three arms of public safety who are out to help us. I had made friends at the firehouse down the street from me, but it wasn't until December of 2020 that they knew me. I didn't know that. When they pulled up to the house, they said, "This isn't for you, is it?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh God, we would have been here faster." Now they're only just over a quarter mile away from me.
Right.
I said, "What do you want me to do?" They just said, "Don't do anything. We're just going to bring the gurney up, sit you on the sit side, and we're going to take you into the ER." And that happened twice in 5 days. But they knew I was a brother, and their assistance, their demeanor was just like they would take me in as a brother still on the firehouse. And I was amazed by it, but I was a bit offended because they should be doing that for everybody, not just me because I'm a former firefighter. And for the most part, what I've heard about our other crews, and I've met a bunch of them at the various stations in our city, that's their goal also.
I wanted to add, I have a very dear friend, Dr. Olivia Johnson. She runs the Blue Wall Institute, and she does for police what I do for fire.
Okay, great. I'm thrilled to hear that.
You can Google that Blue Wall Institute, Dr. Olivia Johnson. And, I'm humbled, and
What was that name again?
Dr. Olivia Johnson.
Olivia Johnson?
On the Blue Wall Institute. It's out of the Illinois area.
Institute. Great. I'm going to reach out to her.
Yeah, please do. And Steve, I'm humbled to have you have me on your show again. I absolutely appreciate it. I apologize to those with my allergies, my runny nose, and things, but that's that time of the year with all the wind and the dust in the air here in Vegas. It does affect a lot of people. But thank you, sir, for having me on and let me just bring a little bit of my world to all your listeners.
Well, your world is a very personal sector of what a number of us are trying to do to bring humanity back to the fire service, into EMS, into law enforcement. Please don't base your judgment on law enforcement on bang bangs and shoot shoots you see on TV dramas. That's not the real thing. And also, by the way, many departments across the country allow citizens to do a ride along. Now you'll have to make an appointment, get an application, fill it out. They will check it and vet it, and you might be one of the ones that they choose to ride with them on a shift. It could be a daytime shift, what we call the swing shift, from the late afternoon to about 11 p.m. And then there's the overnight shift. Whatever it is, I can tell you, having ridden with police many times in various communities, take advantage of it. If you want to learn more about the men and women who protect us from crime and things like that, learn about your department. Don't just assume that because you're in this part of town, they won't let you ride with them. That's not the case at all. As long as you have a clean background and you have real interest, and you're going to tell them why you want to follow them, don't be afraid to do it. You can't really do the same in your fire service because they don't have really that person. Maybe a battalion chief could be. I did get a couple of those rides back in the day, but learn about those who care about you. The three divisions of first responders: our fire service, our law enforcement, and our great EMTs and paramedics and EMS. And then you'll have a better view and better knowledge of the people who are in your community who have taken an oath. They don't just walk in the door and say, hey, I'd like to be a firefighter. Okay, come on, you can pull that hose next time. You have to be vetted by them. And who knows? There have been people who have ridden along with the fire department in high school. And when they turned 18, they started the fire academy. Some of them have gone to the police academy, and others go to the great schools that provide EMT and paramedic training. Everything you learn in any of those classes is beneficial. You won't learn anything that's useless. Everything you learn in those classes will be beneficial. So again, to our guest, Jeff Dill, it's great to have you back, Jeff. Thanks for making some time for us, sharing these sad numbers, but giving us the hope that with certain endeavors on those in leadership areas of these first responders, and what we can do on our podcast and other podcasts that you've been on as well. And please, Jeff is coming up with an interview with retired Chief Arjuna George. That'll be coming up in the not too distant future. Please listen to that one as well, because number one, they're both my friends. Jeff's been a friend for well over, I guess, 7 years at the minimum, right? 7 years. And so this is our 9th season, yeah. So 7 years. And the chief has become a dear friend, and he became, which I didn't expect, became an acolyte of me when he was first on my podcast. And he's now doing a great podcast you should listen to. You should read his book. Jeff, is there any books that you recommend that people could read?
Well, that's a great question. There's a lot of good books out there, so I don't have a list in front of me.
Okay.
But if anyone is interested in that, I can definitely get them those books.
Great. They'll be a big help. All right, folks, thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching the video, this will be the end of the video show. And if you're listening to the audio, again, you know what's going to happen. We're going to take a break, have a few PSAs, then we'll come back to finish off the episode. So to all of you who tuned in today, thank you so very much. Again, to our guest, Jeff Dill, thank you for making the time for us and joining us. And we'll be back on shooting another one on, I think it's Monday or Tuesday of this coming week. So we'll see you then. Stay safe and stay well, everybody. Bye-bye.